Welcome to Tea and Jyotisha. Um, I thought I would come and share a little bit about the big shifts and changes that are happening in the sky sphere this month of April 2022. Now, I am not a Jyotishi in the way that some of you know my husband Michael is, and I am not going to make any kind of big predictions. Um, and it really also always comes down to your individual horoscope and where these things are playing out for you personally. But there will be some very big changes. And so I just thought I'd share a little bit about those, and then also about how some of the things that I'm teaching this month are designed to be in accord with all of that. Okay, so let's get started. So at the very end of March, we had one change that you might already be starting to feel the effect of. It lasts about a month, and that is that Venus moved out of a position that was really uncomfortable and felt hemmed in and restricted into a place that's much more enjoyable. So, depending on how that's playing out for you, you might feel a little bit more uplifted than you did even just 2 or 3 weeks ago, a little bit more hopeful, a little bit more comfortable. That might be more comfort in your relationships. It could be more comfort in your home, more comfort in your work. It could be more comfort in your physical body or even in your mind, your mental state. So, where you might have felt really restricted or uncomfortable or hopeless or like you were lacking sukha, sweetness in one or more aspects of life, it might feel like some sweetness has reasserted itself. So that is a really good change and really happened just in time for the beginning of our Navaratri, our 9 nights of celebrating the Devi. And so that really sweetens the 9 nights and days of Navaratri for us. Okay, so now coming up, we have some really huge changes. And by huge, I mean changes in grahas. Grahas isn't planets is not a good translation. It is the bodies the that move and influence us in the sky sphere. So that includes the planets and the luminaries, the sun and the moon, and Rahu Ketu, which are the shadow planets or the nodes. So a big change means the change in the grahas that move slowly and thus less frequently. And so we have starting a move of Rahu Ketu. And if you've done tea and Jyotish with me before, you've heard me talk about Rahu Ketu. These are the nodes. These are the serpent of the sky. Rahu is the head of the serpent, and Ketu is the tail of the serpent. And these are slower moving, and they're making a big move into the sign of Aries around April 11th or 12th, depending on your location. Whenever something moves into Aries, that's the start of a new cycle for that graha because it's the very beginning of the zodiac. Now, whether this change is an improvement or not is yet to be seen. But what I can say is that a big change like that offers us an opportunity to ask for improvement. And so, right around the 11th or the 12th of April would be a good time to do some extra prayer, sadhana, contemplation. And in particular, when it comes to the nodes, that might be around any patterns of addiction or difficult, problematic habits that you've established for yourself, or around fears, or around renunciation. Um, And so, in other words, if there are places in your life where you have created a kind of addictive pattern, you can ask that in this new cycle that be shifted. If there are certain fears and anxieties that you have been experiencing, you can also look at those, write them down, and burn them in a flame, or release them into, a water source like the sea or a flowing river, or bury them in the ground, or talk through them, with in a therapeutic relationship or in a loving friendship or something like that, to kind of look at what are the anxieties and fears that have maybe been plaguing your mind or your body or your life that you can ask to release in this new cycle of the serpent Rahu Ketu. There is a renunciation pattern that happens with that serpent. In other words, there's a call to kind of either be overly addicted to things and be grabbing at things, or to be pushing things of the world away and renouncing them. And we want to have that in the right order. We want to be, so to speak, addicted to the right things, the things that are good for us, the things that are beneficial to us, addicted to healthy, fresh food, addicted to positive relationships, addicted to beneficial practices, addicted to deep study. If you're going to be addicted to something, be addicted to those, and then be renouncing the things that are obstacles, as opposed to being addicted to the things that cause us problems, that create more obstacles for us, and be renouncing the things that would actually be beneficial to us, or running away from certain things that actually are our dharma, for example. Okay, so interestingly, I was just noting this yesterday when I was contemplating these changes. Rahu Ketu is a serpent of the sky, and they're moving around April 12th. And on April 13th, I start teaching a Patanjali Sutras program, Patanjali Yoga Sutras program. And I haven't really taught Yoga Sutras publicly for a larger group, actually, ever. I've only ever taught Patanjali to very small, private groups of people. And so I'm noting that Patanjali is, in fact, an incarnation of the serpent Sheshanaga, who comes to deliver profound sacred teachings to help the world. And so Patanjali is a serpent, and I'm starting teaching this literally right around the day when the serpent begins a new cycle in the zodiac. So it's interesting to watch those changes. Okay. The next change that will happen is that Jupiter will move. This is also a really big deal because Jupiter only changes signs once a year. So it takes 12 years for Jupiter to move through the whole zodiac. So a move of Jupiter, which is very slow and heavy, Jupiter's name is Guru, the heavy one, the one who protects. It has a heavy impact, for better or worse. It will have an impact. It is a meaningful change. And so Jupiter is moving from Aquarius into Pisces. And, whether, again, this is positive or negative is yet to be seen, and will probably be mixed depending on, all of the different influences, and will be different depending on each individual. Okay. So, but one of the things that Michael shared with me is that the move of Jupiter into Pisces is definitely positive for spiritual study. And so it's a good time to embrace that if they are the right opportunities for that. Of course, with all things, we want to be discerning. And Pisces can be a bit emotional. So we don't really want to make emotional choices about who we study with and what we study. It should really be driven by some discernment, by some taking a moment to walk around the situation, as you have heard me say many times, to think about, is this really right for me? And then let yourself dive in actually deep and commit. Jupiter in general has to do with deep study, with teacher-student relationships. Jupiter also rules children. And so we'll see who gets pregnant as Jupiter changes. And we will also see what happens for children in general across the globe. Is this a positive change for kids? I certainly hope so. I think it will be mixed, but definitely it'll be a new cycle for the children of the world for the upcoming year. And Jupiter also rules expansion and wealth. And wealth takes many forms. It doesn't just mean financial wealth. It can mean all different kinds of abundance and wealth. And so this is another thing to, bring into your contemplation and your practice right around the 12th and 13th of April is, what do you want to expand? Is it something in the spiritual realm, the spiritual study, the teacher-student relationship or mentorship? Is it your financial wealth and circumstances? Is it your work? Is it relationships? Is it something to do with children and family, which again, Jupiter rules? So, whether you're a parent or an auntie or an uncle or a grandparent, expansion could be around children. So yeah, that's Jupiter. And then at the very end of April, right around the 29th or 30th, I think, Saturn moves. Now, Saturn's move won't be permanent. Saturn will come out of Capricorn, where it has primarily been for the last 2.5 years. It will go into Aquarius. And then after some months, it'll actually go back into Capricorn for a while and then finally burst out of it again into Aquarius for a longer period of time. Saturn is really the slow mover. Saturn is the one that's considered the old, elder, slow moving graha. And Saturn stays in a sign for 2.5 years at a time. So its move is really big. Again, this won't be a permanent move. It's going to come out and then go back in. But when Saturn comes out, that should give us a little bit of a relief. Where we have felt fear and restriction, we might be able to be relieved of fear and restriction, because Saturn in Capricorn has to do with rules, restrictions, feeling hemmed in, hard work, intense karma, fear and anxiety. And so around January 2020 is when Saturn went into Capricorn. And so you can understand now why the words restriction and fear and things having to do with elder people would be the themes of the last 2.5 years. And what happens is right around the 2-year mark, which was this past January, we start to feel like we can't take it anymore. Either like it's never going to end, or like it has to end. There's no way this can go on, or like I can't do it anymore. I give up. And we still have, a few more months to go at that point. So change is coming, shift is coming. You'll get a little bit of a relief and then kind of get thrust back into some of these patterns again, and then we'll get more relief again after that. So again, around April 29th would be a really good time to do some contemplation about, looking at the fears and the anxieties and the restrictions and the hard work internally and externally of the last 2.5 years, and think about what can we move out of, what can we let go of as a society, as a family, as a community, as individuals. What can we step forward into, and what are our hopes? What restrictions would we like to let go of? What fears and anxieties would we like to let go of? And what might we want to embrace moving forward? It will be moving into a little bit more of a humanitarian position when it's in Aquarius. So you could also think about, in what ways would you like to be a true contributor, a selfless contributor to those that are close to you in your life, or to, on a larger scale, depending on your own personal karma. And Saturn is always associated with work, hard work, and karma, where Jupiter is associated with expansion and dharma. So, with Jupiter moving, you think about, what is your dharma? What is your deeper purpose? What do you want to expand into and embrace? And with Saturn, you think about, what is the work that I have to do here? What are my karmas? What are the actions that I have to do? And how can I orient my mind and my life in such a way where I can embrace right actions, right karmas, and do the work that I'm here to do in the world? Because all of our dharma involves karma. In other words, the momentum of karma is what calls us to certain purpose in our lives. But that purpose requires hard work. And that's Saturn. So Jupiter and Saturn both kind of moving around the same time, as they have been doing, is really meaningful for these really kind of the biggest themes of life, dharma and karma. And so, as you can see, these are huge changes. And again, it will depend on where these things are in your horoscope, how this will influence you as an individual, whether it's your health, your relationships, your work, your finances, your home, travel, um, studies, all the different themes of your life may be impacted in different ways. But suffice it to say, they're really big changes. And so, why do I have Hanuman here? This is a Bhakta Hanuman. Actually, I think that this is a Hanuman that Michael and I bought together. I know exactly the shop in Northern California where we found him and fell in love with this Hanuman Murti. And I think it was the first year that we were a couple. So he's been living with us for 21 years or something like this. He's a really special Hanuman. We don't always keep him out because Hanuman isn't really for having in the home all the time. It's more of a temple murti or an altar murti at times. And so we brought him out this month because Hanuman, as you may know, is known to take a great leap across the ocean from the southern tip of India to Lanka in order to participate in rescuing Mother Sita and in shifting the world karma to a better place. So I have been contemplating Hanuman at this time because I feel that April is a time in which we are all going to be asked to make a great leap. And part of Hanuman's story is that he had great power, great capacity that came as a result of his birth, and also that came as a result of some circumstances in his childhood where he was gifted many boons. And he had so many capacities and powers and potentials, but he was a mischievous little boy and he misused them. And so he was made to forget all of his capacities, all of his powers for a time. And he would only remember them when his heart was full of devotion and when his powers were most needed. And then he was able to, in that moment, take this huge leap across the ocean. So, this is what I feel we are going to be asked to do in April. It has been a heavy 2.5 years in so many ways, individually, for communities, and for the globe. And the world will never be perfect, but at least we can say that at the individual level, and what is the world but a grouping of lots of individuals? What we can say is that we have an opportunity in April to leap forward. But you can't just do it. To take the great leap that these huge shifts in the grahas are inviting us to do, we are going to have to do two things, maybe three. We're going to have devotion in our hearts, like Hanuman, have trust, have love, have a capacity to surrender ego, surrender problematic desires, surrender the mischief that gets our minds into trouble. And the best way for that is devotion, because surrender means surrender to something. So we can lay our heads in the lap of the divine and surrender the ego and surrender our fears and surrender what's been holding us back during these last 2.5 years. Surrender can really only happen at an individual level, but a lot of individuals releasing ego and letting go of fear, that changes the world, right? And so we're going to be asked to, or we have an invitation to, lay our heads in the lap of the divine. And Navaratri is a wonderful time to do that. It's perfect timing. Thank you to the Vedic calendar. Okay. And then we're going to have to really release our fears that have been holding us back, our confusion. We have to let it go in order to leap forward. And then we have to remember our capacity, our power, our Shakti. We have to remember what we're capable of, and we have to remember what we're here to do. What is our dharma, and what are the karmas that we're here to do? And so I am calling this month the month of the supreme leap. It is truly a supreme leap that we have to take. We have to trust. We have to leap without knowing whether we can even do it, which is what happened to Hanuman. Ram, 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 Ram on his lips, remembering the divine, his heart full of the divine, his head in the lap of the divine, and then just trusting that the power would be there and releasing all of the fears that were holding him back, releasing the mischief that had held him back before, and taking a great leap without knowing what would happen. And he was tested on the way. And more to come of his story in the months to come. I think I'll share more. But there were many tests as he took that leap. It wasn't so easy. And that is generally how it is for us. And we only can go through all of those tests with a devotional attitude, with a soft temper, a soft attitude, and with trust in the divine and trust in our own capacities. So, because of this supreme leap, for those of you that are in my SRY Studio, Supreme Release Yoga practice studio online, or those who wish to join me for a month or more, starting tomorrow, which is Tuesday. Tuesdays are Hanuman days. I just realized what good timing. Starting tomorrow, we are practicing a series which I'm calling Supreme Leap. So I have a vision for what that will be, but I'm also going to really just let the divine tell me what to do along the way. But my vision is that I will tell some Hanuman stories that relate to our human experience that have to do with what holds us back and with devotion and with taking a leap forward with all of our powers and capacities. And we will be doing practices to nourish and soften and release and lengthen the psoas. Because the past 2.5 years have really been a time of fear and restriction and limitation and dehydration and vata, that all really influences the psoas in terms of the physical body. Psoas is what grips and dehydrates when we experience fear, when we experience restriction, when we experience limitation, whether we are being held back by circumstances or we're holding ourselves back, or we simply feel fear and anxiety that is our own or that is put upon us. All of that will always restrict and dehydrate the psoas. And as long as the psoas is in that kind of a state, we absolutely cannot leap forward. It's impossible physically, energetically, in the subtle realm, psychologically, psychically, at every level. If the psoas is dehydrated and restricted, we will continue to be held back even when the universe is delivering us an opportunity to leap across the ocean into the unknown and into our own power. And so we are going to do a lot of course, decompressing of the whole spine and nourishing of the whole spine and the subtle realm of the spine, which is what Supreme Release Yoga is all about. But we'll be extra emphasizing the psoas, because in order to leap, you need a soft, hydrated, juicy, yummy psoas. So we will nourish that region, which means that we'll release fear, because when you nourish and rehydrate, the fear that is locked into the psoas truly does melt away. You don't necessarily have to think through everything and pick it apart. This is the ground up method, right? Bottom up method, as they say. So working with the body to release the fears. And then we will move into leaping. We are going to practice something that I teach only once in a while, and it's been over a year since the last time I taught it. And that is an upright lunge, which is a practice that then helps us integrate. It'll help you integrate pelvis, heart, and head in the body and in the subtle realms. It'll help you integrate the lessons of the past into the power that you need to leap forward into the future that will let you not be held back. And so we will come up and find leg muscles and arm muscles and abdominal muscles while keeping the spine open and soft. We will invoke the prayer position, Anjali Mudra, as our Bhakta Hanuman has right here. And we will have this capacity, hopefully, by the time we move through the weeks of this Supreme Leap series, to be upright, active, and leaping forward in life leaving fears and restrictions behind, and all with an inner devotional attitude of love that will carry us across the ocean into our futures as individuals and as a collective. So that is Supreme Leap. That is what I'll be teaching in April, along with the Patanjali program, of course. And that's a little bit about our Hanuman, and a lot about, or a little bit about, the major changes of Rahu and Ketu, the serpent in the sky, Jupiter, the guru, the one that helps us expand and bring sweetness and richness into our lives, and Shani, the great Shani, that teaches us lessons and tells us what hard work we have to do in the world so that we can live up to our dharma. So big, big changes in April. And I hope that it all brings goodness to each of us and to the collective human family. And that's it. That's a little bit about what's happening.